So hello, good afternoon from my side. Thank you very much for attending this seminar. And also thank you for the Tieturi and Informator about this opportunity. And I'm really glad to share the ideas of the IT and the information security assurance. And just to explain it a little more organized way, I've actually prepared the concept which helps to better understand what we are discussing here. And just to make sure that the idea of this concept is actually established based on the practical work experience. So a lot of experience from financial sector, but also energy sector, public sector. And I've also had a good cooperation with the biggest technical university here in Estonia. So all those experiences actually helped me to establish this concept, what I'm going to explain. And just to conclude that during the recent years, I have found many ISO related standards which are actually helpful to explain this concept even in more detail. So we are able to find ISO based management systems for information security, cybersecurity, and we are just able to use the standard based frameworks and guidelines and practices to actually support the real implementation of this concept. So let's make sure that we are starting with the assurance concept. Let's go through this during this presentation. And after that, I'm able to provide some examples related to the ISO standards, how to support the implementation, but also I'm able to clarify what kind of roles, responsibilities in organizations may be appropriate to deal with different pieces of the concept so that the full picture is going to be understood. And also we are pretty much able to take the really concretely the process approach, which is the idea of the ISO standards also. So to put all this assurance concept or framework actually work and operate, we are able to explain the processes behind the activities. And if this is clear, we are able to see the interactions between different roles, different processes, and if this is well understood, then it's possible to even reach the concrete results if the assurance framework well established, what may be the practical results of this appropriate implementation. But I'm proceeding with the explanation of the concept. So let's assume that pretty much every company today has some kind of legal obligations or requirements by the different sources. So they somehow have to deal with the security. This is pretty much the must today. And if no direct requirements based on the standards or regulations, we are able to rely on the security expectations. And those may be raised by the clients or partner organizations. So let's make clear that we have some requirements available, and the idea to proceed with this assurance concept is to better to explain how to actually comply with those requirements, and also We may expect that the requirements are going harder during the years because the information cybersecurity demand is going to rise. So it's a good idea to make better preparations for that. And if the requirements are actually met, we are expecting back that IP risk, information security, business continuity is managed. So we are able to present the appropriate activities, actions to make sure that the requirements are actually met. So we are going to comply with the legal side, or we are able to comply with the standards or security expectations only if the appropriate actions are taken. And this is good starting to start with the requirements and then reach to the results. And we are in more detail able to explain what is actually between the requirement and the result. And one way I am taking it is that let's try to understand that in each organization is somehow already managing the appropriate processes, and let's call it as the current profile, which is provided in presentation also. So we have the profiles available to deal with business processes. So this is quite clear that somehow we have to manage the business side and related processes to actually carry on the organization or company main mission to keep the main activities up and running. And it's quite common that these core business processes are related with production or sales or providing some services. And all this may be explained with the business profile. Somehow we are doing it, and we are able to clarify in more detail. And this clarification may be needed to set up the context of the data handling. So it's quite clear that during the business operations, we have to take care of the data or data handling or information management. So let's make clear that it's not so much important here what is the exact name, but still we have to take care of data, especially put attention to the critical data or vital information assets. You have to ensure that the critical assets are appropriately protected and maybe even classified. So another important process here, let's make sure that somehow we are managing the data, not only the business, but data is also somehow managed. We are able to actually raise the second profile, which fit into this assurance concept. And then we are able to proceed with more this IT or information technology side. So it's quite clear that somehow we have to deal with this more technical IT infrastructure establishment or setup. We have to keep it operational. We have to take care of the administration activities. Maybe even we have to take care of the data centers. So all these may be considered as the IT. So another profile, it's fit really good here into our concept. And also important here that today it's already quite common that for this IT infrastructure we are able to use some cloud services. It's quite common that we are just buying the IT infrastructure or more technical side from the service provider. and then reaching this infrastructure as a service cloud models, and this is pretty much covered with service provider. But also then we have to make sure that appropriate level of security is there to help to protect the same data or information we already started here. And this is once again needed to to protect our business, to make sure that all the requirements for the security are actually met. So the next profile we have to take care as well is all this IT governance side. So not only this infrastructure level as this IT or more technical IT, but all this IT governance. We have to keep the IT processes up and running. Maybe we also have to deal with information systems development. It may be considered as part of this governance. And in overall, we are able to relate this profile here as the IT service management system may be considered here. So somehow we have to manage the IT related services, and we have to be ready to cover all this infrastructure or more technical side, but also have to cover the higher level as the, for example, information systems or even the application level. So all this may be considered as part of this IT governance. So once again, let's create another profile. So somehow we have to take care of this governance side. And the next one is related with IT risks. So pretty much automatically the risks are there if we are running the business, taking care of the data and managing the IT and infrastructure. So we have to consider that risks are pretty much automatically there. So this is even not our decision if we want that risk is there or not. It is happening automatically. So another profile we have to take care of this risk side. And it's quite common that first we have to understood the risk, and if the risk is understood, then we are able to actually create appropriate security, which may be considered as another profile. So IT controls, we have to somehow deal with information security controls implementation. So we have to have something there to actually help to deal with the risks and keep the risk at acceptable level. And this is another profile we are able to create here. And if somebody has more experiences with, for example, Gdpr, General Data Protection Act, we are able to rely on the same logic that this Gdpr is stating for information security, pretty much the same. So if you are processing the personally identifiable information, you have to understand the risks and you have to implement the appropriate controls. So just to explain that the common sense is pretty much the same, and that the profiles are meant to actually cover both the risk side and the control side. So, but even further, we are able to proceed with the compliance side. Not only that compliance may be needed to actually ensure the same legal or security requirements are met, but also the compliance internally, that all the internal goals for information security we have established are actually ensured. And this IT compliance side may more reflect to this supervisory or regulatory side, but internally also related with this internal control function or even the department. So let's make sure that somebody is going to make sure that all the requirements, is it external, internal, are actually met. And also, really important profile we are able to reach here is the incident side. So even if the risks are understood and controls are placed and compliance is there, still we have to face the information security, cybersecurity related incidents, for example, data breaches or system outages. Then it's good idea to set up the incident management process even before the real incidents are actually there. So it's great to use the existing process already if the incidents are happening. So this profile certainly helps to raise the confidence level for this assurance that we are, even if we have the incidents, the preparations are there, we are able to solve the incidents with appropriate time to actually make the losses to the business side as minimum as possible. And the last one we are able to put here as the profile. So let's make sure that the continuity is also considered. Somehow we have to be prepared to operate continuously. And today already quite significant part of this continuity is related with the IT systems we are using in the organization. And we are able to even understand this profile as the IT or ICT readiness for the business continuity. And maybe quite clearly explained, for example, the risk is ransomware. It's quite common. It's happening already. And the continuity capabilities are more related with data recovery capabilities. So let's make sure that we have the appropriate capabilities, so the risk is actually on the appropriate level or acceptable level for the organization. Maybe consideration here. So, but just to make sure that this overall picture is able to explain in more practical view, let's make sure that all those profiles are in practical life somehow connected with each other. It doesn't mean that we have the different profiles there and they are not connected with each other. And just some examples are provided here in the presentation. Let's try to see more practical what is pretty much the clue between the different profiles. So in the business side and data handling are somehow taken care. We are able to understand that clue is, for example, classification of the data, and we are able to proceed with the labeling. So classification may mean that some of the data is much more critical, important for the business purposes. So it's quite clear that let's put more attention for the security side for this critical data. So at least some common understanding between the business side and the data side. Classification may be already a good start to explain it in more practical way. And another, which is between the business data and the IT side, good starting point, maybe this business impact analysis, which is provided here. So let's try to understand what kind of systems or IT assets are more important for the business side. And one good example here may be that, for example, in the IT asset, as the network is considered as the critical one, you can imagine that if the network is going down, we are not having the network services anymore, it may cause big trouble to the business side. And this is the idea of this business impact analysis. So let's make clear that we have to put more protection or even more attention to keep the network services up and running, because the impact to the business side is really big. Another practice quite common is that let's even establish some service level agreements between the business side or IT. It's quite common that we are using the same approach for the service providers. If the IT or infrastructure is provided by the service provider, still we may need the practical link as the service level agreement with the service provider to make sure that appropriate level of the service is there. And we are even agree the appropriate necessary security based on the agreement. So many examples there, but here just to explain that let's try to gather some more practical understanding about what are the connections between the profiles. So another provided here is between the IT and IT governance. It's quite common that we are able to find some service management systems, for example, based on the ITIL. At least I have experiences, this is quite common. So all the IT services may be managed based on the appropriate framework to take care of all this help desk function and change management and dealing with configuration items and making sure that all the systems, the infrastructure parts are appropriately updated. So many IT operations we have found there. And also we are able to proceed with the capability maturity model, how capable the IT service is for our organization purposes. We are able to seek more understanding from this total cost of ownership, return on investments of IT is pretty much how the whole IT service is managed or IT governance is ensured. So many practices may be useful to set up the appropriate activities inside the profile and between different profiles. So IT governance and IT risk, we are able to explain all these monitoring capabilities or even the monitoring requirements. So on the IT side is working well, but let's take care of the monitoring, because monitoring is able to give the appropriate indicators for risk side. If some incidents are already there during the monitoring, we are actually able to understand that risk is going to realize or is realized already. And the practical clue may be considered as the key performance indicators, risk indicators, even the single point of failure is mentioned here. So, for example, if you have this in this IT infrastructure, really critical parts, and if something happens with the critical part and everything is collapsing or going down, it may be considered as a single point of failure. Let's take care that we understood what they are, what are the risks related with them. So even between the IT or more technical side and understanding the risk, we are able to create the practical link there. So another If the risks are understood, let's take care of reporting the risk to the appropriate risk owners or at least the decision makers. So if the risk is remaining over the acceptable level, based on the report, we are able to provide appropriate attention that this risk has to be taken care. We are able to use any kind of checklists or even proceed with a return on security investments before we are going to present appropriate controls. So just to make clear that another way to find more practical possibilities is provided here. And if the controls is also covered, let's put another link between the controls and compliance side. For example, the review of security operations or even the auditing may be appropriate here. For example, the use of internal audits may give the answer to the compliance issues. And if the auditor is presented there, going through the same security controls based on the security objectives, we are able to collect even more confidence, or in our case, more assurance that the appropriate level of the security is actually there. So this event through, let's even proceed between the compliance and the incident side. For example, the compliance side is covered even we are running some yearly internal audits related with information security. Still, we may need some testing or even the forensic capabilities to better prepare for the incidents. So we are able to explain internally, for example, the SOC function, which is the Security Operation Center. So if the incidents are not there, but we have the team established, there is no need that the team is just sitting there and waiting for the incidents, but they are able to more put attention to the say monitoring or security operation side to be better prepared than the actual incidents. This may be the explanation here. So many practices may be introduced so that we are able to raise the capabilities to actually solve the real incidents. And if we are proceeding between the incidents and continuity, we are able to explain some business continuity planning or recovery time, recovery point objective. And it may be also considered so that this is not directly the link between the incidents and continuity, but more we are able to go back to the beginning and create the continuity link with the business side. So let's agree what are the recovery time objectives, how quickly we have to get back the critical systems if they're going down, how quickly we have to restore the information or data based on the recovery point objectives. It is pretty much the agreement between the business side and those roles and responsibilities who have to make clear that our IT systems and our organizational capabilities are able to recover the systems based on the agreed objectives. So good starting to proceed with the continuity, and we are able to reach even the ICT, information communication technology readiness for the business continuity. If all this IT side is very critical for the organization, so many options we actually have here to seek the information inside the profile and create links between the profiles. So, and only if this is done or clear, at least the overall approach of this assurance concept, we are able to seek the support from the ISO standards, which provided here, and only some examples are provided. So pretty much to say that we don't have the room here in presentation to list all the appropriate standards, but just to make clear that the ISO standards may be helpful to better establish the same profiles and even seek the communication or links between the profiles. So the first one here is the ISO 9001, which is the quality management system. So it's quite common or even practical that business side is seeking these quality assurance processes. So it may be appropriate standard to help the business to get better results. And in order to organize this business profile, this quality management standard may be helpful. And we are just able to proceed that for the data handling, the standardized approaches are there. So to better understand what this profile may be based on the standard, we are just able to reach the standard and use it for our purposes. And here, just to make clear that ISO is not providing only the management system standards for this, for example, IT service management or information security or business continuity, which is mostly the management system, but also it's possible to proceed with the practices or guidelines. So we are able to reach the lower level standards to which actually guide to set up the appropriate profiles inside the organization to work for our purposes. And some examples are provided here for the IT. Not only this one provided here, but for example, quite common or even similar for this ITIL approach from ISO world. This is the 20,000, this is the service management system standard, which may be helpful to better organize the IT services. If this is appropriate, we are able to use it for our purposes. And if we are reaching this risk side, quite common guideline, or at least a common sense how to deal with the IT or information security risks is to rely on the guidelines on this ISO 27005. If we are proceeding these IT controls or even the information security management system, we are able to seek the support from this 27001. It's based on my experiences. This is this most popular so far. Let's start with information security management system, and then it's just possible to proceed with standards or guidelines related with the controls implementation. For example, 27002 may be a helpful standard or guideline to follow to actually deal with IT controls. We are able to reach the list of the standardized 114 information security controls, how to better implement those controls is explained based on this 27002. And just to make clear, the logic here is that we're able to use the guidelines from controls or risk side to actually support the implementation of this information security management system, which is the 27001. So those possibilities are provided by the ISO standard. And just to explain that we are able to use those standards to support building up our own profiles. And for the incidents, we are able to use this ISO 27035. Is another guideline which may be helpful for security purposes. And if this guideline is followed, we are able to raise the level of assurance we are actually seeking here. Just to explain that we don't have pretty much no clue how to set up the appropriate incident management process. We are able to take the guidelines from this 27033, follow the guidelines, and then we already have the abilities to set up appropriate process. Similar for the continuity, 22301 may be considered as the business continuity management system. And we are able to proceed with the guidelines, for example, the same ICT readiness for the business continuity, which may be helpful to support the continuity management system. So some examples are provided here, and we are even able to proceed. For example, I have experiences that recently, actually really recently, last week, I provided the training based on the cloud security management standard. So we are just able to proceed with similar approach. If, for example, for this IT, we are using a lot of cloud services, then it may be a good idea to proceed with this cloud security management guidelines also. So we are able to collect another example of how to deal with security and seek the assurance based on this assurance concept, and possibly using the ISO standardized approach. And another I have actually planned is to more related with this data handling. So it's quite common and practical also that in dealing with the information security, a lot of these privacy or personal identifiable information protection questions are rising. So I'm developing further these privacy guidelines for security management, and there are many opportunities in ISO world. So only based on what are our requirements, we are able to seek some support from the ISO side. Just make clear, all the standards are provided here. This is not the full list, but we are able to pretty much for each profile, we are able to find many appropriate management system or practices standards from ISO side. And if this is clear, we have to take care that if the standards are used or not used, still we have to reach these appropriate business processes and information management and writing processes. All this risk analysis or risk management processes, communication, all these information security related processes, and cover this with auditing. Is it internal, external? For example, if the organization wants to reach to the certification, then it's maybe even organized so that the external auditor is going to run the certification audit activities. And if the results are good, we are able to reach to the international certification of the management system. And related with the audit, we are able to certify this service management system or information security management system, or even the business continuity management system. And if we go back to the beginning, for the business side, we are able to even certify the ISO-based quality management system. So all those opportunities are actually there. If we are reaching this auditing side, so let's make sure that incident management is prepared, and let's ensure that business continuity related processes. And here it's also really important that not only the disaster recovery capabilities are there, but if the disaster is not there, let's at least run some testing of the risk scenarios and our recovery capabilities. Maybe the idea of this business continuity process provided here. And also a really practical side is that let's try to understand that behind all those profiles, we may have different roles and responsibilities in organization. So for the business side, CEO, Chief Executive Officer, it's quite common, the overall responsibility. And we are just able to proceed that we may have this Chief Information Officer to deal with all this data handling side. We may have this IT manager, or quite common is also Chief Technology Officer, who is more dealing with this infrastructure or technical side. We may have some dedicated functions for risk management, and quite common, we have this dedicated Chief Information Security Officer who has to take care of this security profile. And if this profile have to reach the compliance side, we want to make sure that all the requirements are met. We are able to proceed with IT or information security audits, internal, external. So different roles are included here. To better prepare the incidents, we may need some incident manager or incident response team. It's quite common for even the crisis management, maybe named here. And for the continuity purposes, we may have dedicated business continuity manager who has to make sure that all the necessary business continuity capabilities are there, including the IT readiness for the business continuity. Many different roles. Is it C-level or not C-level? Definitely has to be considered there, and they have to take care that those profiles are actually filled with appropriate activities, and we are only able to proceed that the description of the processes and guidelines and practices and management system requirements may be based on the ISO standards. And if this is done, we are able to reach on the regulator side, so we are able to actually provide appropriate evidence to the company owners or regulators that things are proceeding rather good. You are able to explain how they are working to provide the appropriate level of assurance. Yeah, and if it goes to the real practical implementation, we may face some dedicated internal project manager who has to take care of all the activities to actually set up the profiles, fill it with activities so that those profiles are able to provide appropriate results. So last one, here I actually want to conclude to leave some time for the possible questions and answers also. If this assurance concept is understood, maybe even internally explained between the different parties inside the organization, we are able to proceed with any kind of certification trainings and training plans and all the appropriate roles who are responsible of dedicated profile or process, or able to proceed with certificates. Is pretty much explained here, but not only to training sites, which may be useful and reach the certificate. Maybe even more important here is that if well done, we are able to go through some common checklist for security make sure that information security management system is established, maintained, but also maybe operating, certified, improved. All this may be collected here. And if it goes to the risk side, information security risks are identified, analyzed, decided, treated appropriately. Security controls are there, and incident management process is there, and help to solve the incidents if those are happening. But even more, for example, cybersecurity, dedicated cybersecurity program is there. Operational security is integrated with IT operations. The internal control activities are established. So internal audit, for example, is prepared, and business continuity or IT readiness for the continuity is ensured. And all those appropriate plans are developed, tested. And the last one here, I just explained that recently proceeded with cloud security management. So another idea is to proceed with a checklist. If your organization or company is using a lot of cloud services, we are able to even collect another check to the security checklist. The cloud security program is established and operating. So we are even able to develop this checklist further, whatever is important for our purposes. But just to explain that if we are taking this simple assurance approach, we are able to even proceed with this approaches here to actually fill the checklist to make sure that all the activities which are actually went through are able to ensure reasonable level of security, and if this is there, we are able to raise the reasonable or appropriate level of assurance to the clients or owners or regulators or partners, whatever may be required for our case. So, but I'm just leaving the further context here. If any questions related with the certificates, we are using this PCB, the Professional Evaluation and Certification Board. Certainly, if the training events are organized in Nordics, we are able to reach the Tieturi informator training schedules, and any questions related with the same concept or the content of the training programs itself, you are just able to reach me as formally consulted, and I am able to even in more detail explain the approach presented here. So, but overall, I went through all what I wanted to explain here. We have some roughly 10 minutes. If there are any questions, I am happy to provide the answer, or if I'm not able to provide answer here and right now, we are trying to reach back if the questions are raised.
Yes, thank you, Andrew, very much. Well, I'm not sure if this is a fair question to ask, but since it's presented here, I'll ask it in any case. Which of the standards, what you listed there, which of those do you think is the most kind of relevant or important, and why? If you have to pick one, and reason why particularly that one.
Yeah, I think it's really simple to explain from this management system perspective and the guidelines or practices perspective. And I have had many experiences that it works really well, so that for security, let's start with the 27001. This is the management system. There are some requirements based on the standard, but certainly it helps to pretty much to set up the overall frame for the information security. And if this frame is there, we are just able to proceed with practices. For example, inside the frame, we have to cover this risk management side. So we have to understand the information security risks. And then it's good that the management system understanding is already there. And more from practical side, let's proceed with risk management, or sometimes the logic work that if the management system is there, we are clearly able to see that risks related with cybersecurity are really high, and we may need more practices to deal with the cybersecurity. Then it's good that this 27001 information security management system is there, and let's focus more this cybersecurity related controls. We are able to reach this ISO 27032 as the standard from ISO board. So just to conclude that it may be a good idea, let's proceed with the management system, let's proceed with the guidelines, practices, whatever is needed or more needed for our purposes.
Okay, good, thanks. How about, do you see, is the top management, so the C-level management, are they enough involved in these activities, or do they usually kind of outsource it to IT or somewhere else?
Yeah, I think this is all the time good and practical question, and I think that years ago it was pretty problematic that top management said that all this security has to be covered with the IT side, and this was the practice. But today, I think more and more the understanding of the involvement of the top management is actually there. And really practical advice from my side is that if we are going to spend some roughly 1 week to explain what is the information security management system, it's certainly a good idea that the participants maybe found that let's try to seek at least half an hour to make some even short brief to their management. So let's explain what is actually expected from them, and it may be practically really helpful. So
yes, that definitely is a good idea on most of the topics, to provide a clear list of what's needed from you, and then then you maybe get it. That's true.
Yeah, but explaining the management system standard, it's quite easy to do that. We are going through the full list of activities to actually implement and to present to the management. You are just collecting the short part of that and explaining that you have to be committed as well. Otherwise, we are not able to implement this in appropriate way.
Good, thank you. And I think that's actually a really good kind of ending point for the webinar, to leave it with that idea that it's not just the one person, but it's the whole company's activity. And what was actually referred to here, that well, the trainings, they of course are pretty much for the individuals, but then of course the certifications, they are for the whole organization. So it's not just one person, or as you could see, not the one role's responsibility.